Just when you think an already unpredictable 2020 MotoGP World Championship was just starting to balance out, Mother Nature throws a curveball and skittles all of those predictions away again. Danilo Petrucci's win at the French MotoGP, held in tricky wet conditions at Le Mans, makes him the 7th different winner in 9 races. And yet again serves to make this year's title battle even harder to call, with only 5 races to go. Now, no one is ever really a loser when it comes to days like this, when the riders really earn their salaries. But while some earned their water wings, there were those who were definitely drowned out. What a performance from Danilo Petrucci, and where exactly did that come from? We're big fans of Danilo, and his maiden win at Mugello in 2019 will certainly never be forgotten. However, many had almost forgotten the man himself coming to France, with Petrucci struggling on the Ducati GP20 in a continuation of the lacklustre form he slipped into after that Italian victory. However, Petrucci has always performed well on the wet, so when the heavens opened, he was likely to be more happy than most. But it's not just the win itself that earns Danilo our plaudits here. It's also because he set this up from Friday, when he pounded around getting a feel in the wet, before translating that to an excellent run to the front row in the dry on Saturday. Easily his best qualifying performance of the year, it put him in an excellent position to capitalise on Sunday too, and he didn't waste the opportunity. Confidently leading from the front early on, when Andrea Dovizioso worked his way past, it was Petrucci's emphatic response that earned him both the lead and ultimately the win. In short, this is a Danilo Petrucci we haven't seen in a while. His second career MotoGP win, it will serve as a reminder to Ducati of what it's letting go next year, but certainly raise a smile at Tech 3 KTM, of course, who landed his services for 2021. It's certainly been a trying maiden season for Marquez, who has not only had to get his head around what is clearly a tricky Honda package, which seems to be the equivalent of selecting expert difficulty level on a computer game from the start, but he's had to do it with the spotlight trained directly on him in his brother's absence. With Mark soon returning though, Alex has done a brilliant job of reminding us that talent certainly runs in the family, with a genuinely exceptional performance. Showing deft ability in the wet and a confidence in the way he picked off his rivals that should know better, Marquez's consistency in evolving conditions bettered anyone else out there today. It also rather shamed his similarly inexperienced rivals who went backwards instead, and it's no exaggeration to suggest a couple of extra laps, or a higher starting position, would have seen him take a victory today that somehow would have been even more of a shock than Brad Binder's or Miguel Oliveira's. Then again, frankly, absolutely nothing surprises us anymore in this season, and we love it. Takaki Nakagami, a winner? Yeah, indeed, stick with me on this one. Okay, so the Japanese rider didn't set the world alight in France, and given he hasn't stood on the podium this year, unlike 15 of his rivals now incredibly, he's become an anomaly that demonstrates just how important consistency at this level really is. A 7th place finish in Le Mans is a decent result. It's also a 9th consecutive top 10 finish. No podiums, but no DNFs either. He is the only rider to come even close to demonstrating such metronomic consistency. As a result, it's prompted a rather remarkable set of circumstances in that he is now up to 5th in the overall standings, despite the fact he's only finished higher than that once in a race this year. He isn't even that far off the top either, at an in-striking range 36 points from leader Fabio Quartararo. While we wouldn't necessarily suggest Nakagami, who is riding a 2019 Honda, don't forget, is a title contender, but when riders say it's important to keep scoring, he is an excellent example of all those points that have gone begging for the likes of Quartararo, Joan Mir and others this year. He won't necessarily feel like a winner from 9th place, but it was a mature showing from Fabio Quartararo in circumstances that could have easily betrayed his inexperience at this level. Starting on pole and as an odds-on favourite, Quartararo didn't even have the chance to reflect on the impact of the rain before he was wheeled off the grid and brought back on to get underway. While he wasn't the only rider not to have started a wet MotoGP race before this one, he definitely had the most to lose. So while he wasn't so quick, he wasn't reckless either, avoiding getting in a fluster as rivals picked him off lap by lap and not dwelling on what could have been had the rain stayed away. So a frustrating day for sure, but a measure of the complete rider Quartararo is becoming to not only protect his title hopes, but, remarkably, even extend his lead a little, out from 8 points to 10 points. Okay, first, a disclaimer. It is difficult to call anyone a loser per se when conditions like this are so tough, but there were riders that perhaps could have made most of their opportunities based on prior experience. Indeed, no one on the MotoGP grid has more experience than Valentino Rossi, but for the second race in succession, he was down and out, putting paid to any remaining glimmer of a glorious 8th Premier Class title. In fairness, what happened to Rossi at the start of the French MotoGP has happened to every rider at some stage in their career, coming into the first proper braking zone in untried conditions, losing the rear, popping off, and watching the rest of the field escape as you calculate what just happened. No one has turned more wet MotoGP laps than Rossi, and while he may have been a good shout had he continued, it's another unsatisfactory end to a weekend in a year of highs and lows. Similarly, Maverick Vinales, given his experience, should have been punching further up the order, but after getting a bad start and being knocked wide by his falling teammate, his pace was no better than rookies Quartararo and Mir around him. It feels like we've had Vinales in the loser camp a few times this year, and yet he's still only 19 points off the top and very much still in contention for this title, such as the 2020 MotoGP season it seems. We so didn't want this to be the case for Cal Crutchlow after such a return to form this weekend, but he can only really look back on this race as a missed opportunity. While being British generally earns you a title as a wet weather specialist, regardless of whether it's actually true, Crutchlow does have good form in dicey conditions, as shown by his maiden victory at Brno. Fourth on the grid in the dry, which is the first time we've really seen Crutchlow anywhere near the front this year in what has been an injury-ridden season, he was circulating solidly with the likes of Marquez and Oliveira when he took a tumble at the notoriously treacherous turn 4. So while Crutchlow was left picking himself up off the floor, Marquez would go onto the podium. Let's just say it's a result he really needed in a season that has lurched from one issue to the next already. From the highs of Catalonia to the lows of France, it was a weekend to forget for Suzuki. The GSX RR doesn't have very many flaws, but what flaws it does have were exposed somewhat this weekend. While the bike's increasingly famous late race performance is a measure of its excellent tyre preservation, the flip side of this is the slower manner in which it can get heat into its tyres, which hampers it in qualifying and at the start of races generally. However, the particularly cold conditions at Le Mans, the product of MotoGP racing unusually late into the year in Europe, left Suzuki very much on the back foot, with Mir and Rins well down in qualifying. Rins almost restored some honour with some excellent wet weather riding in clear air, only to look a little loose in direct combat before throwing away an almost certain podium with a crash, the second time this year that he has done so after Austria. Mir, who hadn't started a wet MotoGP race until this weekend, is still in the title hunt after bringing it home safely in 11th. But given the final 5 rounds will all be raced in Europe, and the winter warmers are being brought out of the cupboard now, the weather, rather than the racing, could turn out to be the difference between winning and losing for Suzuki in this incredibly tight title fight.